Hey, Vsauce, unnamed Asian kid knocking off Vsauce here. We tend to take what we see for granted. We tend to recognize as what we see to be real. For example, take this apple for instance. When we look at this apple, we can firmly conclude that it's real. Or is it? This goes back to that question of, can it be known that the physical world actually exists? Or in simpler terms, is anything that we see real? Well, one philosopher seems to believe that he has the answer to that question. George Berkeley was an Anglo-Irish philosopher. You might know him as the guy that very famous UC was named after. Berkeley proposed the idea of est est percipi, which is Latin for to be is to be perceived. If something is to exist, then it is to be perceived. To explain this better, let's bring back our good friend, the apple. You know, this apple was smuggled over the border by a few Chinese friends, and it looks really good. I think I might take a bite out of it right now. Excuse me for a second. That right there is a good apple. Now, you know that I took a bite from this apple based on what you just heard, and based on the descriptions about it that I can give you. For example, it was very juicy, maybe a little bit too hard for my braces because my teeth kind of hurt right now. But you weren't in the room when I bit into that apple. You weren't here to perceive that bite. So how can you know for sure that I actually bit into this apple? Okay, fine, maybe I didn't bite into that apple. But things happen around us all the time that we don't see or hear. For example, if a tree falls down in the middle of the forest, no one's there to perceive it. So how does Berkeley explain that the next time we walk into that forest, we see a fallen tree? How is this the case? Well, Berkeley was a very religious person. He believed that there was an ultimate perceiver, a God. God was the reason for everything that we saw. And if you don't like the word God, we can replace it in this explanation for another mind. So that's it, isn't it? We've cracked the age-old question of, does something still happen if no one's around to hear or see it? The answer is yes, because there is an other mind who is responsible for everything that we sense, everything that we feel, everything that we touch, see, hear. They're all results of that other mind. Everything is just an illusion. Kind of like how y'all thought that I took the bite out of that apple when, in reality, I didn't. But hold on before you start jumping off buildings because everything that you see are just illusions. There does exist some problem with Berkeley's explanation for what we see. And if not Berkeley's explanation, then what is the explanation for what we see? There are three basic ways in which what we see can be explained. The first is my mind. This explanation suggests that everything that we see are results of our own imagination. Now, important note here, imagination in this case does not mean dreams or hallucination. It's something that we actively imagine. So, this explanation is basically saying that everything that we see are because we're imagining it. Sounds nice, doesn't it? But there is some very clear issues with this explanation. If everything is just results of our own imagination, then we should have total control over what we see. For example, if I wanted to see a Lamborghini right now, I can just imagine it and one should appear. And obviously nothing appeared. So we obviously do not have total control over what we see. Then the my mind explanation cannot stand. So if we are not in charge of what we see, then let's go back to what Berkeley suggested. Another mind. But the problem with explaining everything that we see as the result of another mind is that it would grant us the opposite of total control. We would have no control over what we saw. It would just be like watching a movie where you have no control over what comes next. You're just watching, or just like watching this video, you have no control over what I will change into. Now, let's try this. Look away from the video and look at the floor. Did you look away from the video and look at the floor? If you did, then that means that you have at least some control over what you see. You can direct your vision from one focus to the other. You can focus your eyes from this hand to my face. You obviously have some control over what you see. So explaining everything that we see as the result of another mind is then false. Now you may be thinking, what if that other mind that is causing everything that we saw just now forced me to look away? What if he created that intention for me to look away? Wouldn't that explain how I seemed to have control over what I saw? Well, if your intentions are not yours, so if you lose the ability to intend, then that calls into question the existence of yourself. You see, a part of you being you is your ability to intend. And once you take that away, then we can't be sure that you are really you. So unless if you are willing to call into question the existence of yourself, then the explanation of other mind has to be false. So if our mind and some other mind isn't the explanation for what we see, then what is? What's left? The answer is the physical. Take this apple. If I didn't imagine it to exist, or some other being didn't imagine it to exist, then it's only left with really one option for its existence. It has to actually exist in the physical world. So in summary, there are three ways in which we can explain what we see. My mind, other mind, or outside of all minds. My mind is false because it would grant us total control over what we saw, and we obviously don't have total control. Other mind is false because it would mean that we have no control over what we saw, and we clearly have some control over what we get to see. So that just leaves us with outside of all mind, which means that what we see has to actually exist in the physical world. Berkeley was wrong. The explanation for what we see is not another mind. Something physical has to actually exist. But if you're still skeptical about the existence of the physical world, then think of it this way. The next time you take a bite out of an apple, doesn't it taste so much better if you know that the apple actually exists versus the apple being simply the result of my imagination or something else's imagination? And as always, thanks for watching.